But what he did in that conversation is he challenged the individual to take responsibility over their commitment to getting better versus putting that on the shoulders of other people. Um, and that makes a huge difference in the success, I think, of anybody in most aspects of life, but especially in recovery and certainly within our program.
All right, seems like we're all good. So, Jason, take it away. Tell us about what you do.
So my name is Jason Docton. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit called Rise Above the Disorder. Um, it's kind of an interesting approach as a nonprofit. Essentially, we saw that the vast majority of people struggling with mental health issues oftentimes couldn't afford the mental health care that they needed, didn't have insurance, didn't have the money to afford an increasingly high cost service. So we almost kind of kickstarted a way towards creating a universal mental health care system. Um, and after several iterations, we seem to have got it right. And we've been able to use this system to help about 30,000 people get entirely free mental health care. So we've, grown it from what was once a little World of Warcraft guild trying to provide people with advice on mental health care to trying to uh, kind of reiterate what the mental health care system can be.
Wow, it's incredible. I was reading your website earlier. It says 22,000. You just said 30,000. The idea that you've helped 30,000 people get free mental health care is staggering.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey. I think we started off boosting people in video games. That was my leadership decision. If we're going to get on that topic, um, that we boosted people in World of Warcraft, and then we boosted people in League of Legends, and we would take what we made from that boosting, and we would cover the cost of people's therapy. Um, and eventually, we got found out by Trick2G and this band Imagine Dragons, and they
Oh,
did this
nice.
huge benefit concert for us, which raised about $500,000. And we didn't really know what to do. We were like, wow, this is a ton of money. So we essentially just spent all of it just greenlighting anybody who ever wanted therapy. People would apply on our website and they'd go, look, this is where I'm at in life right now. Can it all afford to go? I'm a broke college student, or, I had two kids really young and I can't seem to get things going with a job full time. And we just say yes, 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 over and over and over again until we blew through all of that money. And then it kind of hit us where it's just like, well, we're kind of not done doing this. We should probably learn how to run a business instead of just giving money away. And kind of turned everything around and got us moving on the path that we are now.
Wow, that's amazing. And so, part of what we're going to talk about tonight, I think, is the relation of mental health and the workplace. You focused originally with mental health kind of for gamers or for everyone. Did you have a focus to what you did with Rise Above the Disorder?
Originally, it was on gamers. We
Yeah.
were actually called Anxiety Gaming, and that was my first executive decision, which should have been, I guess, a precursor to how bad some of my later decisions would be. Um, but yeah, the focus was helping gamers. There was a WoW guild that we ran. There was a Justin TV stream that we ran, and it was really just focused on this idea that gamers can have a significant impact in the lives of each other if we were focused on helping each other. It took like an approach to universal healthcare long before we even imagined it in that vein. As this kind of social welfare system that gamers created.
Okay, and one of the things we didn't get a chance to do that we should have, because we were scrambling with the studio here, was normally we would bring up your website, which is yourrad.com. Is that right?
yourrad.org.
Yourrad.org. Sorry. So Pink Dragons can put the link in chat once she finds it. But I encourage you all to learn a little bit more about Jason because he's obviously lived this journey. And then chat's asking, what's your education? So I know that from having looked at yourrad.org, but do you want to share a little about your background and kind of your path here?
Sure. So my background was in biopsychology. And biopsychology is a very specific subsect of psychology where we study the way that depression, anxiety, other mental health issues might look like biologically, so within the body. My particular focus was on epigenetics, so the way that genes express themselves. My core research was in the potential ability for somebody to go through the process of recovery and have their genes reflect in a way where it potentially doesn't pass these disorders down genetically. So we know in current research now that depression, anxiety, some of these things can be passed down genetically. We know that they typically have to meet with some kind of environmental trigger. So something traumatic happens in your life, you're genetically predisposed for a mental health issue. When those mesh, something negative can happen. But what happens if we go through the process of recovery through therapy? Is there a way where we can change our genes so that they don't express in a way that could be passed down for predisposal? So that was my specific focus. And I studied that out of UCLA and then eventually went to med school at UCI, where in the course of the first year of med school, started to personally struggle with anxiety issues and saw just how ill-equipped our system was from the inside out to address these issues. And it kind of became my sole focus to address this straight out of med school. And so I dropped and went and did this instead.
Nice. That's commitment. And so, but I wanted to share with the audience, you started down the educational path that would equip you for this role, but then pivoted into just living it.
Yeah. That is definitely one way to look at it. I think, I always wanted to be some type of healer. I always imagined that was the role that I was destined for. But I once had a mentor that had told me something that really, really stuck with me when I was in college. And he had said, the ideal career for anybody is a mix between what you're passionate about doing and what the world needs you to do. And I saw it in those moments as it aligned that this was both something that I really loved, but I was being called to do this specifically.
Wow. It's fantastic that you found your calling relatively early in life. I don't think I found what I would call my calling until later. So, and I think a lot of the audience is that way. So, one of the traditions on my channel, which is I often open with a rant. And so I have a little bit of a rant I want to share about this, which is I think a lot of people allow embarrassment or stigma to keep them from seeking mental health help because society doesn't want you to be. It can be embarrassing to be thought of as unwell, and most of our words for mental health, some of them are neutral, and the rest are negative. We don't have like a way that I can think of to express that someone has glowing mental robustness, but we have crazy, nuts, bonkers. There's this whole list of pejoratives.
Mm.
And so I think my rant on this, to actually rant about it for a second, would be don't let him, if you need help with something, don't let embarrassment or stigma or what other people are going to think or say. We're going to have to kill the. Dave, I don't know if you can.
That was your sound, I think, as they came off.
Yeah, that's the sub notification, and so it's coming through the
Oh.
speakers. So thank you, Pashi, for the third month of subs.
Yay.
But yeah, we're gonna turn off audio notifications. But thank you in the meantime. So anyway, on the rant, don't let stigma stop you. And Jason knows, he saw me go on Dr. K, or at least knew I went on Dr. K on Friday, Dr. Kanajia's stream, and ended up talking about my very personal history in front of 5,000 people. That wasn't a lot of fun, and it was very nerve wracking to do it, as things became very personal in front of what you knew as a huge audience. But I was proud to do it because if my example can help someone else feel comfortable seeking the help they need, that's fantastic. And so, and what I would say, and Jason, I'll have you weigh in on this in just a second, is how do we reduce the stigma around searching if you think you might need mental assistance of some kind, or you might be struggling with a challenge? There's not only the financial angle, but the stigma angle. So do you want to say a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. The stigma has been probably one of the biggest barriers to people seeking mental health care for quite a long time. You mentioned some of the words that are thrown around when someone talks about getting any kind of support. But I think there's too those kind of realistic challenges of, what happens in the workplace? What happens with my close friends? Do they judge me for doing something like this? Will people find out? Increasingly I'm seeing in the younger generations, there's more of a normative conversation around getting better. And surprisingly, I feel like with the amount of memes that are coming out about people and their experience with their therapists, that's almost been one of the most positive ways forward in a long time. We're starting to kind of wrap our head around why the stigma exists, and we're starting to grow into a culture where that stigma is no longer, I guess, a thing that's keeping a lot of people from seeking help like it was a couple of years back. It certainly still exists, but I think increasingly youth are seeing that as a non-issue. They're more seeing the issues of, well, how does one actually go about doing this? How does one find the right kind of therapist for themselves? And how does one actually afford to do it? Some of the ways that we've seen that have been really impressive of people being able to break the stigma is simply like the commercialization within music and the music industry, and having some of these big artists come out and just openly state plainly that they seek professional help. Or when we have a lot of people in traditional sports are starting to kind of make that step forward. I'm not sure if it's a long, drawn-out conversation about what it looks like getting psychotherapy. I think it's much, much more seeing people on the other side of it. So, even from our perspective, what our nonprofit seeks to do to work against the stigma is it's almost seeing as the stigma work as a byproduct. If we heal people, if we get them into a better place, they become more the speakers, they become more the leaders of why that process is so important and so necessary. And they end up, being the best possible example. So it's interesting, but I think that's probably the way forward too. It's convenient for what we do, but it's convenient because it's something that we've thought on for many, many years.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was going to save questions for later, but we have a question that was submitted that I feel is really on point about this. So let me read it out, and our mods will pin it for the audience. It says, at what point during the job interview, acceptance, work progress, should someone share that they have a mental illness, especially those of us who hide it, but might end up needing some accommodations? It's hard not to fear being passed over for someone that is neurotypical. And I think that's where the stigma comes out. Speaking as a leader, right? I can see that, and I'll talk about how I handle it in a second. But I'm curious your thoughts on that question from the audience.
I don't think it does. And that's maybe more of a personal thing. Um, there's a lot, I especially see it when I talk with other people that work within the mental health space, and are big advocates of, what people think about. Should these be things that we talk about openly? These be things that we just bring up, even unprompted? And it's kind of a mixed bag. I'm of the impression that one's personal mental health is really their own business. And, when it gets to the point of affecting those around them, that it's, a personal responsibility to address it, but not necessarily anybody else's business to be involved with it. Um, so, it's been something for me when I worked prior to starting a nonprofit, where I was younger and had anxiety. It was something that I could bring up in a workplace, or I could choose not to. But I think the reality is that if it affected me to the point of making me unable to do the job, then I certainly needed to seek professional help, and address that. Versus, maybe I should just, if I'm in a good place, if I'm working on these issues, and I feel comfortable bringing this up, technically you have some kind of laws that protect you. You do
Mm-hmm.
have protection, but nobody's ever going to fire you or not hire you for a mental health issue. They're going to say it's your performance. Um,
Well, they're definitely going to
actually,
say that. They're definitely going to say that.
certainly. Mm-hmm.
Um, so, just speaking for a moment as a leader, um, and not representing Amazon, but speaking from my experience, um, at a workplace, if in an interview, for example, someone brought up a mental uh, challenge or a mental condition, or that they were seeing a therapist, we would say, well, thank you for sharing that, but that's actually not, I can't, I can't and won't use that in an interview or a job consideration.
Sure.
Our job is about your performance. That said, I can understand people being fearful about, in the back of my head, do I say, well, I've got three candidates. Let me take the one with less risk who doesn't have this problem, this perceived problem or limitation. Because if I'm biased again, or I haven't dealt with mental challenges, I might think, well, this person may have some risk and other people who at least haven't admitted to having the same challenges don't. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what you
Yeah.
can say about that, except society is changing, as you said, to be more accepting of the fact that seeing a counselor is normal, potentially taking medication can be normal. Um, those aren't abnormal or concerning or performance impacting issues.
Right. I think one of the things too that factors into that is as therapy and seeking help becomes normative. I mean, how often do you go into a job interview and, if you're slightly overweight, say, well, I'm also going to the gym, by the way. That's something where somebody would look at you and be like, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's good for you. I don't think that factors into this in any way. As does your weight or your overall physical health affect this particular job? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So that's something that I would look at. But I do see this quite often. We do work with a couple of professional esports organizations, and one of the things we'll have is a lot of players will reach out to us privately, and they don't want it brought up for any reason, that they struggle with these issues, not because they don't want to be advocates, but because they're afraid that they may not get hired by other teams, or that they might get let go of.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a genuine fear that people have, and certainly, as some of the older generations, there's been seen statistically to be a discrepancy. So older generations being less likely to hire younger individuals who openly struggle with mental health issues.
Right. So, I think that is the tough issue, and I'm not sure we're at a solution other than, as you said, this being more normative and more. The more people talk about it, it in that sense, it is like struggles with weight. It is like it. broadly speaking, I don't want to antagonize anybody by saying one thing is like another, but it's like uh, sexual identity. Those used to be issues no one talked about. And so they were more highly stigmatized. And I can imagine that if it had been possible to have this talk 30 years ago, we could have had the same discussion that would have said, well, if I'm gay, when should I bring that up or let anyone in my workplace know? And there would have been tremendous concern about that. And now, while there might still be people with concern about that, I would think there would be people with much less concern than they had in the past.
Certainly, and I know one of the things that we see statistically is that a great deal of really powerhouse CEOs struggle with bipolar disorder, and during that manic phase, they seem to be pretty aggressively good at getting things done, versus kind of the depressive phases where they might struggle for a few days. And I can see where the question comes up of at what point do we have to look and say, well, this person that regularly has panic attacks on the job is maybe not the best candidate, versus, what people are going through in their personal life isn't my business as a business owner. And that's always going to be a tough one. I think, of course, quantifying anything related to mental health is always going to be so unique to the individual as well.
Right. And chat here, I'm not the expert on this, but chat here is discussing the legality
Mm.
of mental considering mental health in employment decisions. I don't specifically know. I kind of know what I've been taught in my workplace, and I understand you're not a lawyer, but do you have knowledge about that? You can answer people of basically if someone were to choose not to hire someone because say they had anxiety, is that broadly speaking allowed or not allowed to do that?
Melee J had it correct. At least in the United States, it's considered a medical condition, and you can't discriminate against somebody for their medical
Yeah,
condition.
which is what I thought.
Yeah, but it's again, it comes down to the reality is nobody's ever going to say they didn't hire you or fired you because of your mental health. They're always going to say, well, their performance
Mm-hmm.
was lacking, or they maybe didn't have the right fit for the
Right.
team.
And to that point, this is a good point on mental health and the workplace. I think there probably are jobs because there was a case you're probably familiar with it a few years ago where it seems like a German plane pilot had some sort of mental health issue that actually was known, and then he flew a plane into the ground. But because of
Jeez.
privacy around that, there were issues. His doctor wasn't able to tell the airline, hey, you might have a problem here. And so that was a huge, like, how do we handle the competition between specific jobs that are very high risk? This guy was in the co pilot seat of a passenger airliner and his privacy. And I don't think they ever resolved that, but that's one of the rare cases where it probably becomes job impacting.
Yeah, and here in the U.S. too, you typically have a good layer of protection from your therapist until it gets to the point where you are a risk to yourself or others.
To your
And at that point, that's typically when they can come forward and share that kind of information.
Yeah, and as I understood it anyway, in that case, maybe German law was even more restrictive. And
Sounds like it, yeah.
yeah, but you're right. I've heard that standard as well, where yeah, therapists reveal things only when you're a risk to yourself or others, which is a pretty high standard.
Yeah.
Okay, so something that went by in chat a little while ago, and then you can ask me whatever you'd like about leadership, or we can have that discussion. There was a discussion about forgetting being able to pay for assistance,
Hmm.
the wait to be able to get to assistance can be quite daunting. Do you have any thoughts to share on that?
Sure. I didn't mention it, but we function in any country. And one of the things that we run into most commonly when we're looking at, say, like the national healthcare system throughout the UK, well, I guess England and the UK at this point, as well as throughout Canada, is sure, your care is free, but you're probably going to be waitlisted for months, sometimes even years, before you can see a professional, especially if it's a rarer subcategory or like a psychiatrist. There's very few of them, so the wait is typically unheard of. Um, the problem that we run into in the States is that typically you can find a provider fairly quickly, and there's very little wait time, assuming you're paying cash, or you have some kind of premium insurance. But even then, most clinicians in the US don't want to take your insurance because premium insurance pays them crap. So if you have cash, just like in any other aspect of life, it doesn't really matter. Um,
Access is
that's I
easy.
think, yeah. I always, say time and money are interchangeable commodities. But so I guess to address that question, um, if you have money, then no, you're not going to wait for anything. If you don't have money, then yeah, you will wait a considerable amount of time, and it's a horrid situation. Speaking of psychiatrists, there's about 8,000 adolescent psychiatrists per 70 million children. Imagine the wait time for something like that.
It's
Um,
10,000
when
to
we're,
1. It's a 10,000 to 1 ratio.
yeah, it's pretty bad. I think the wait time is only going to get considerably worse. The hope is that more and more people will turn to this as a profession and play a part in it, but the ones that are can't afford to do it. So again, it's going to come this balancing match between can anybody even afford this and how long is it going to take to get this once I can afford it or if I can't. Um, there is no open solution to that, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, it's going to, well, yeah, it's not appropriate to problem solve here, but it's going to take a different approach to educating enough people that can provide services. Well, whatever. I went into problem solving. So, U.S. So history for those of you who don't know it. Jason and I met through our mutual friend Devin Nash. Devin introduced us, and Jason suggested we talk a little bit about the leadership perspective. So, the leadership perspective on mental health and how that relates somewhat to workplace stress, which is the topic I had in mind and I've been working on. Where would you like to go next in our conversation?
I think one that's kind of been in chat that combines with this um, is does your boss actually care about you? And to what degree that even means? Because there's care in the sense of does your boss want you to do well because they need you to perform? Does your boss care because they genuinely want you to be a happy employee? Where's that cutoff between your boss's interest in you and your boss's interest in themselves?
Right. So, I can speak to this as a leader myself and also as an employee. I talk a lot to chat about the value of finding a great boss. And I also talk, and on many of my shows, how most people leave a job over conflict with their manager. That's the number one reason that people leave a role. If you interview them the day they leave, they may say all kinds of things. They say, oh, money, better opportunity, my spouse, whatever. But if you call them up 2 years later when they feel safely away and say, so why did you leave Acme Inc.? 70% will say it was my boss.
Mm.
So that's thing one. And then on managers, Jason and I talked just a few minutes before the show. let me talk a little bit of harsh reality about global business. If you just step back and throw all morality and human concern out the window, there's a cold calculus that says businesses pay to get work done, and the more work they can get done per dollar, whatever business has the best system for getting work done per dollar will be the most successful business in the long term. Mental health then plays in, or employee wellness plays in, only when employee wellness is profitable. It improves that equation. And now, again, this is in a totally amoral, inhuman view. So, in this robotic view, you would only worry about employee health to the degree it ups productivity. The challenge we have there is productivity and the effect of mental health on productivity is very hard to measure. Can I people have the idea, we're making hamburgers or injection molded plastic parts or alcohol. It's a manufacturing process. Mental health, who knows? What I know is how many barrels of alcohol came out the far end, or how many hamburgers got sold, or how many container loads of plastic stuff went on the ship. And I think that's the challenge then. I will happily talk about what a knowledge workplace tries to do with work environment, but I think that's the hard part. Jason, is there anything you would say before I jump in about about showing that investing in mental well-being actually is a good business strategy as opposed to just a good humanitarian thing?
Yeah, and it's one that I've personally found a lot of interest in, which is why I bring it up. You run a nonprofit that is based on mental health, and the expectation is that the mental well-being of everybody involved is put first and foremost. Um, Versus it's also a business. It needs to be run as a business for it to succeed, and that the product of that business is people taken care of that are not within the nonprofit, but rather the clients, the patients of the nonprofit. So I kind of face a very similar, interesting objective of, how do I help people that are around me, but how do I help them help other people is almost always the priority. Otherwise, we won't succeed in what we do. I guess my thought on it is it's probably one of the greater stressors of being a leader. And somebody mentioned in chat, this idea of either being, just somebody's boss versus being a leader in the workplace, I think is the amount of emotional investment involved with the people around you, and even kind of the emotional awareness of yourself. Where am I comfortable? Where are other people comfortable? And how mindful am I of the level of comfort around me? And to what degree is that my business versus to what degree is it none of my business? And inevitably, other people around me will struggle. And there's a finite amount of stuff I can do about that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's such a complex topic as a leader. So leaving aside the harsh exploitative world I described, as a leader, I want my team to be happy, healthy, and engaged. And I want that because I believe that will retain them and it will motivate them to do their best work. It will allow them or give them the environment. And so, though I'm sure I fail at this all the time, and the great thing about my stream is my employees, some of them watch it. So I'm leading in public quite literally. Um, uh, your leaders need to, I'm not expressing this well, but basically, you want your people to be healthy both for their own good because you care about them and because it makes them productive. The allows them to be productive. It doesn't make them productive. It allows their natural productivity to come out. So the thing I do teach, when you ask as a leader, what do I do? The thing I teach is I believe everyone comes to Amazon or wherever they work every day intending to do their best. So I'm sure there are many harsh work environments around the world that are digging ditches or harvesting crops or whatever, where people may just be trying to survive. But I address largely a professional knowledge workspace. And for knowledge workers, they're coming to work to be successful and to feel successful. Given that, investing in enabling them to do that, I don't have to worry they're going to be like, oh, well, now I'm really happy, so I'll just screw off. Like that isn't, it's not as much of a risk. What is hard as a leader is if a topic comes up and someone is suffering some sort of mental anxiety, I am so unqualified to talk about it, and the words and terms are so loaded that you can very quickly feel disempowered. Like,
Sure.
because if I say you seem depressed, I'm in all this dangerous world where, first, by saying you seem, I'm projecting and I'm assigning a feeling to someone else. And that's danger number one. And then number two, do I mean depressed like lowercase d? Hey, you kind of feel bummed out today. Or do I mean depressed uppercase D, like you meet the checklist, or I'm suggesting you might meet the, you would know what the medical manual is called. I can't remember, but like the
DSM.
the DSM 4 or whatever that would say, oh, you meet the clinical definition of depression. I have no idea. So that's where, as a leader, I can do things to encourage a positive work environment and I can care about people. But when things go off the rails, my tool set collapses very quickly because I have neither the expertise nor the language. So that's what I find as a leader. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that quite a bit. Yeah, I think another one that kind of comes up along that same line of thought is that kind of really tough barrier, especially if you're new becoming a leader. Maybe you don't have an HR or kind of like a really strong extension staff just yet.
Yep.
Where that line between friend and leader starts to be. It can be especially tough, and I see this, in myself, but also a lot of younger entrepreneurs, a lot of new business owners, startups, where they're genuinely good friends with all of the people around them. And that makes that battle of, I'm not feeling too well, are you telling me this as your friend? Are you telling me this as your boss, or because you're seeing me as a leader within this capacity? Where does this conversation begin, and where does it end?
Yep. And this is a great question. It's one I have experience with. Everybody on the channel knows that Awesome Dave, who's sitting down here and is on Jason's screen, he's my producer, but also my friend. And we've worked together at 4 different companies. In 3 of those companies, he worked directly for me or in my organization. And the tricky part, my personal approach to that, I'll share, and chat can talk about it. And you can put in questions if you want Jason and I to address them later. I've hired several friends. And what I tell my friends is, hey, there's this problem with having a friend in the workplace, which is, frankly, people are going to be suspicious that I'm playing favorites. And so I tell my friends, and if any of my friends ever want to come work for me, or anybody here in chat, consider this fair warning. I tell my friends that I'm going to be harder on them and give them less credit in my eyes than their peers doing the same work, because it's
Mm,
not good for either of us if I'm seen as being easier on them and giving them more credit.
interesting.
But then we also talk offline, right? And so basically, the thing I will say about this that I would say to chat is a good idea is at least set the expectations up front. However, you're going to handle friendship at work,
Mm,
set the expectations of where does friend start and friend end. You ask me the question, or you ask the question, is your boss your friend? In my personal case right now, I consider my boss a friend, but he has a funny saying. He says, it's called show business for a reason, not show friends. And so I know with him, there's a performance line where if my performance isn't meeting what he expects, I may get a friendly message of it, but it's going to be unambiguous. So super hard to
right.
handle, right? How do you handle again to your point, my language breaks down. When someone at work confides in you, are they informing you as a manager or are they telling you as a friend? And
Right.
I don't think our society has language or structure for that. Is my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It creates such a unique challenge. I think Guested brought up a really good point too that runs along that. Um, when somebody comes to you and they confide in you about how stressed they are, it does place this interesting onus on you to potentially be more sensitive to where they're at when the reality is, you've got KPIs for them that need to be met.
Yep.
Um, and that's something where you're just kind of like, now I'm maybe less comfortable to ask you to deliver on what I expect you to deliver. Um, and it's interesting the role that it challenges you to play. Um, I always think of leadership as like a successful leader is an incredibly dynamic person. Um, and that's one of those things that kind of keeps you on your toes. Is even if you can set an expectation, which I agree is probably one of the most important things you can do out the gate. Um, there is that constant testing of boundaries on both sides, um, whether it's willful or completely unintended.
So I agree again. Boundaries, chat mentioned boundaries, friendship. These are all super hard. And our biggest problem as a society is we don't know how to handle this because in the past, I mean, I think if you look back at least stereotypically at like factories or any sort of past, you either did your job and you kept your mouth shut and you kept your job, or the foreman replaced you.
Mm,
And there wasn't, I don't know, like Freud is only so, modern psychotherapy is thought to have started with Freud around the turn of the last century ish, 1900 ish. There wasn't any thought of mental health care before then, I don't, broadly speaking. And so it's a relatively new concept and society is still adapting to it.
sure. I mean, and I'm a huge fan of the history of psychology. So it's something I really geek out on. One of the most curious things is it's really not until the 1970s where we get this guy, Carl Rogers, who even starts to introduce the idea of patients not necessarily as the medically ill begging for the doctor's treatment, but really sees people on a human to human level and tries to address them as such. No more laying on the couch faced away from the doctor, but instead sitting face to face, having this kind of open conversation. So we haven't really gotten very far. We're
Oh,
still very, very new.
took 70 years to go from laying on a couch looking at the ceiling to I'm allowed to look at you.
Effectively, yeah. And for the perspective, to even shift, it's within the field, it's it's very, very curious. Psychiatrists, for example, are considered the height of mental health care. However, they're probably the most ill-equipped when it comes to psychotherapy. Not only is it not built into most of their medical training and is optional, but yeah, a lot of them just will never practice it a day in their life. They're much more equipped to addressing the medical needs or the medicinal needs of a patient. Well, we've created so many different roles for people, for mental health professionals, like licensed counselors or marriage and family therapists who are general therapists, despite the name, or counseling social workers, psychologists who instead get what's called a PsyD instead of a PhD or clinical focused degree. All of these spend the vast majority of their training on psychotherapy. And so there's even a huge disconnect and a huge rift still, where the few psychiatrists that do learn psychotherapy, a lot of times they're still learning Freudian psychoanalysis or Jungian's psychodynamics, versus the modern therapist is learning things like strength-based or really highlighting an individual's ability to be optimistic and goal-oriented, or cognitive behavioral therapy, which is kind of the behavioral mechanisms of a human on a very animalistic level. There's just so much disconnect. It's more of a tangent than anything. But drawing back into leadership and how ill-equipped a leader might be, a lot of mental health professionals are ill-equipped when it comes to this stuff. So expecting your boss to be well-equipped to have that conversation of, I'm depressed, what do I do, in terms of work or personal life, you're really not going to know.
Yeah, and I would say we're taught one of our stock answers, one of the few things you can teach a manager to do that's replicable is, well, we have an employee assistance program, call them. Like, did you know we have an employee assistance program? Here's their number. They can help you. And whether or not they really can is a whole other can of worms. But routing people to human resources, routing them to the 1-800 number is about the limit of what you can count on a manager to do, and even that's a stretch. Kristen, one of our people who's in chat a lot and comes on the show sometimes, is a manager. She was saying she sometimes asks people, "Are you telling me this as a friend or as a manager?" That's fantastic. But the interesting thing is, even if they say I'm telling you as a friend, if you are their manager, you have certain both ethical and legal responsibilities. Like, you can't, if you are their manager, you cannot be only their friend. And that's the same, by the way. I'm not an expert, so this is a non-binding opinion. But if you tell your counselor, I'm thinking about violent acts, and the counselor really believes that, they have to report that. They can't be like, oh, you told me, I really believe that you intend to do something awful, but I'm just going to sit on that. They have an ethical and moral responsibility, as I understand it. And so that line is not, you can't just be the friend.
Yeah, it's always a challenging one when it gets to that point. And, again, I think it does come back to that boundaries question,
Right.
and dealing with boundaries, because people will absolutely push those boundaries. Part of being a leader is learning how to defend your own boundary, but really importantly, knowing which boundaries to create. That's I think, been something that's taken me a considerable amount of time. There's that saying, you don't know what you don't know, but good leadership is knowing exactly what you don't know in some degree.
So what I would say is that larger companies, smaller companies are unpredictable, right? Because smaller companies may not have human resource personnel. They may not be aware of the law. They may be led by the dynamic of the leader, who may or may not care about mental health, may have a very prejudicial opinion. At a larger company, I believe the one thing that is pretty strong in my experience is that if someone has an expressed mental condition, whether it's from a doctor, they're just saying, oh, I feel depressed, I think I might have this problem. I've been told by who knows who that I'm bipolar or what manic. You will see human resources kick into a very kid gloves, give this person every benefit of the doubt perspective. And
Mm,
frankly, I don't think that's altruistic all the time. I think sometimes it's simply they fear legal repercussion. But either way,
sure.
in a large company, you generally will see kid gloves, a very careful handling and support for the employee come out. Is my experience as a leader. The manager, who knows, because they have no expertise and it's not a commonly like I've never been to a man. I want to be careful about this. I can't recall being to a management training about how to help someone who expresses mental or emotional challenges. And if it was a footnote in something.
Mm,
And yet, I've been to a lot of training on a lot of topics. It just isn't commonly like, for example, something I can share that people can relate to. I've been to many more trainings in the last 3 years about diversity, equity, and inclusion focused on gender and racial equity and inclusion, not really ever touching on mental neurotypical differences or and I think probably that's something that would need to change for this to be handled better.
mm, mm. I I'm kind of reminded of like a topic that aligns with this really well. Um, and that is of the sensitivity of these issues and these discussions, and kind of the certain sensitivity with which people deal with them. Like you mentioned that HR typically, once this comes up, they deal with it with kid gloves. They're afraid of the lawsuit, they're afraid of the repercussion, and they begin to treat people in a different way. And I think there are some people that are okay with that, and maybe even sometimes look for that as a safety net. And then there are others who, like myself, are more offended
Mm-hmm.
by that kind of behavior than anything. I don't want to be treated different
Right.
because of my mental health issues. I do want to be held to the right standard. Not everybody feels that way, and so certainly you take the approach that makes the most sense. But it is a unique one, and I think it's almost an open conversation you can have that helps you establish boundaries. Okay, well, you're telling me that you struggle with these issues. How would you like me to treat you when
Right.
you're struggling with these issues? Do you want me to, hold you to the same expectation that I hold all of my employees? Or are you expecting maybe that I can give you a break here or there? Really getting into that conversation. Um, I remember once I was with one of my old mentors a couple of years back. This guy Gordon Bellamy. Um, he used to be a biz dev at Tencent, and he created the Madden franchise. He's been in gaming for decades now, but really importantly, on the personal level, he's the leader of blacks in gaming. He's the leader of gays in gaming, and he's built a really strong pathway for a lot of people within the space. And he was doing this panel, and he was in the Q&A, and somebody said, well, um, what do I do if I'm not being represented, like my specific orientation and identity? Um, and Gordon's response immediately was, well, what are you doing to yourself? And it really like disarmed the guy and confused him. I think he was looking for the sympathy play of
Mm.
like, well, I want people to recognize me for me. But Gordon's response of like, well, what are you doing to be recognized? What are you bringing into this situation? Um, I think holds true here as well. If you're going to bring up these issues, if you're going to have this conversation, what are you representing about these issues when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to depression? How do we personally represent ourselves if we're struggling with these issues? Is going to have a lot to do with how the people around us treat us.
Mm-hmm.
If your representation is asking for sympathy, then you may be treated with sympathy and kids' gloves, and I think you will hinder yourself from growth. If you represent yourself as, I've struggled with some issues and it does impact me in a way that I can't control fully, but I'm working on it and I'm getting better. So, hold me to the standard. But if I fail, this is why. Um, but I will work on it. That says a whole lot more about you, and probably creates a much safer space for you to grow, especially from the leader's perspective, looking at somebody who represents themselves that way.
So, Jason, I'm wondering, I think that's, I love that. And one of the things I share with the stream is the original way you portrayed some people's approach to it. I've called out before. You will hear people say, someone should do something. And I break that statement down because what it means is someone, not me, someone else should do, I'm not sure what, because I don't have a suggestion. Someone should do something. Uh, but I want my problem to go away. And so I think any problem as a leader, if you come to me, maybe initially I'll be very concerned about your critical health. Like, oh, but if over time you and the medical professionals working with you in HR can't tell me how to help you and how to help you be productive or how we can adapt the workplace to minimize your anxiety, then it becomes very tough for me because it feels like you're just handing me a problem that I know very little about, that I can do very little about, and that you are doing very little about because it's so opaque. And
Sure.
the normal version of this is saying someone should do something. Uh, that has nothing to do with mental health specifically. It's just basically people complaining.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you see cases, and this is where stigma arises, where people they either seek a mental diagnosis because they believe it will give them advantage, or they use one as leverage. And that's where workplaces become difficult, is if someone uses a label as a lever.
Yes. There's I think two really important points that I've in any scenario, almost any scenario, when you go to somebody with a problem and don't come with a solution, you've just given them a problem that they didn't have. Even if it's a genuine problem that affects everybody, you're the bearer of the bad news at
Mm-hmm.
that point.
Completely.
And that's always tough. Having that solution focused mindset is something that leaders look for. It's also something that people in general really love. If you come to the office and you say, hey, I have anxiety and it kind of makes it difficult for me to be on the phone more. But I found that if I have like a more of like a computer headset, it makes me feel like I'm at home, and that just makes me better on the phone. Great, you've provided the full circle. You've just expressed essentially what you need to be more effective, and leaders like that. How can I equip you to be most effective is a constant viewpoint that I have in the back of my mind. Um, but also a very unique mindset that some people who are struggling have, and um, I see it all the time, unfortunately. Um, on a good week, I might get over 500 applications for our services. There's the need is there.
Yeah.
If we were somehow making money off of this, we would be doing very well. Instead, we're giving the money away, so we're constantly looking at that demand and going, well, how do we meet this demand?
And
Um,
if I could ask, what
sure.
does helping someone end up costing you? In other words, you've helped 30,000 people, And so you must have some notion of an average cost, even though some people will need less and some will need much more. What does the
Mhm.
cost of care for your organization look like?
It depends on the program. So one of the things people mentioned, finding a therapist way earlier in the chat.
Yeah.
Um, that's one of our services. We'll find somebody a therapist wherever they live and make sure that they connect with a great, genuine therapist that'll be of help. That we do for free. It does cost me the hourly rate that our social workers are working on, which is, I mean, we pay them annually, so it's roughly
Mm,
38,000, 40,000 a year, broken down into that time spent per person, which varies often enough.
right.
But the more measurable metric is our grant program.
Right.
I can't at all afford therapy. How much would it be if I got therapy paid for by RAD? Costs me roughly $30 a session. It's about $30 a week. I usually get people fully recovered somewhere between $600 and $1,000 per person. So that's kind of the numbers that I thinking about getting somebody to a point of being well, and not needing our services necessarily anymore. Um, so that's the financial breakdown of it. It's
Mhm.
incredibly cost effective. We cost about three
Yeah,
percent.
that's
Um,
amazing.
thank you. Yeah, it's our system internally is incredible. Externally, it's just we're just giving money away. So, but probably the biggest thing that bleeds us, unfortunately, is people when they apply to the system and they're interested in getting better, but we struggle to get them to take the responsibility. Um, One of the hardest conversation I ever had in my life was when I first started seeing my therapist. And I had seen dozens of therapists and not gotten better. And this therapist sat me down and said, look, what's happened to you in your life is not something you deserved, but it is your responsibility to overcome it. And nobody can do that for you. And it really frustrated me, because there's no way out of that. There's no excuse around that. Um, Nobody is going to resolve this issue. And it's nobody's responsibility. Nobody owes me to address this. Even though, again, I might not have deserved any early childhood trauma, um, and only I suffer, unfortunately, for not dealing with it. And so, um, very often, people will come into the program or they'll seek professional care in general, and they're not ready to take on that responsibility. Well, it's not me. It's your job to fix me. That's what I'm paying you for, is to fix me. Versus it's I, I'm learning this discipline. I am mastering this art, and I have a guide that I'm paying for to help me in master. Um, that is a very very different conversation. If it's not too much of a tangent, um, I mentioned Carl Rogers earlier, but in one of his books he goes in depth about this, where he has this college student when he's a psychologist on a campus come to him, and say, hey, the teacher said that I should see you, because I'm failing my classes and it's probably due to stress. And Carl Rogers says, oh, okay, that sounds very unfortunate, and I'm so sorry to hear that. Um, so why are you here? And the guy says, well, the teacher told me to be here. And he said, so you're here because the teacher told you to. And the guy says, well, I guess, yeah, I don't think I'd be here if the teacher didn't tell me. And so Carl Rogers says, so you don't think you need to be here? And the student says, well, I guess I probably should be here if I'm so stressed I'm not doing well in class. And so Carl Rogers again reframes this question. So you think you should be here? And the guy says, yeah, I guess I do think I should be here. And Carl Rogers says, okay, well, um, you can come by my office next week this same time, um, but only come by if you want to come by, if you genuinely think you should be here. If it's just because you think your teacher needs you to be here, then you can go ahead and just tell them that you don't need to be here. Um, but what he did in that conversation is he challenged the individual to take responsibility over their commitment to getting better, versus putting that on the shoulders of other people. Um, and that makes a huge difference in the success, I think, of anybody, in most aspects of life, but especially in recovery, and certainly within our program is if you take on that responsibility. So, in this framing it back into the main conversation, if people come to you and their objective is to get leniency, and not fully be supported, then I think there is a failure to begin with there. If somebody comes to you and they're looking to take responsibility for where they are in life, a good leader can help them find that path forward. Whether it's, I think you should talk to HR. I think they can help you, or, the best thing that I can do for you as a leader is continue to give you opportunities to succeed, and maybe you should seek a therapist, and that's the best opportunity I can give you.
So I think what you said is incredibly powerful and goes way beyond mental, the issue you're specifically addressing, as you said, which is you have to take responsibility for you. You may need all sorts of help. You may need medication, therapists, moving outside of the mental health realm. You may need mentors, education, counseling, opportunity. You may need lots of resources, but only you can advance your career, which is a lot of what I talk to my audience about on a normal day. Only you can deal with your workplace stress, which is what I talked to on the stream last Friday, and I'll talk again with Dr. K on this coming Friday. Only you can handle those, and I think you nailed it. People want to push that responsibility away because wouldn't it be great if I could pay someone else to fix me? If I overeat, which a lot of people on stream know, I grew up very heavy. The thing I'm seeing a therapist for now is not overeating, but wanting to. The fact it takes so much of my mental energy not to eat crap, and I'd like to reduce that. But in the end, that's me. I have to do it. And wouldn't it be great? Oh my God, if I could pay that therapist a dollar amount to fix my desire to overeat, get out the checkbook. But there is no dollar amount you can write. There is no dollar amount you can write to be fixed.
Sure.
And so the chat wildly wants to know, it's our most voted on question by far of the night. How can people help your cause? What is the best way for them to support your cause?
That's wonderful. I definitely appreciate that. I think the best way for people to help our cause is to get involved with donations. That's a tough ask, but the reality is we've created a universal, and that is supported by people's generous donations. With $30, if people donate $30 a month, typically what I ask for, that means you're guaranteeing somebody has a week of therapy that they don't have to worry about. Giving somebody that sense of security, that sense of concern, that somebody in the world is that invested in them, this person who has, in this conversation, taken the responsibility to get better, certainly goes a long way. So that's really what I welcome. I even actually have a campaign that I'm just about to launch. I can link it in here.
Yeah,
potentially.
If you try and link in chat, it will probably get held up. But if you message it to 40 Pink Dragons as a private message, we have linking turned off in chat. But if you private message it, she can repost it.
Oh, perfect.
And so we'd be happy to do that. And look, for folks in chat, I know some of you can imagine giving $30 a month. Obviously, everything we do here in charity. In this chat, we give to a cause. So I don't ask you for anything. So if you have capacity to support someone, I think certainly Jason's cause, helping someone get mentally healthy, is amazing if that's passionate for you and you can see yourself supporting that. At the same time, I know some people will feel, particularly because there's a lot of younger folks in chat and people early in their careers, that they can't do that. is there any other thing you would suggest to people, either to support your cause or to support mental wellness more generally?
Follow us along on social media. Follow is a very simple way for people to be involved.
Totally
Um,
free, effectively free.
exactly. That kind of signal boosting says a lot. One of the things that's really important to me is signaling. And when you like something, you immediately signal yourself as an ally to people that might actually need help.
Totally.
They might not know that that is something you're concerned about or interested in, and suddenly they do. Especially on social media sites like Twitter, where everybody sees the things that you like, that goes a really long way.
So, Jason, I'd love to take a pause for a minute. There might be some other questions, and I encourage the audience, if you want to put questions in, we're watching them here on multiple screens. So, if you have questions for us, this is a great place to go into our extension and submit them. You don't have to keep leaning out of the way, Dave, because we're going to go another direction for a minute. But one of our channel traditions, which as a student of psychology, as a historian, you will appreciate, we have a channel tradition called Question of the Week. And these questions are borrowed from Arthur Aaron, who is the gentleman who originated the idea that by 36 progressively more intimate questions, you could get to know another human being in about
Mm.
45 minutes. So his first question is very lightweight. And his question is, if you could go to dinner with anyone throughout history, living or dead, who
Mm.
would you love to go to dinner with? It's very superficial. It's
Sure.
very easy to answer because it's not threatening, and everybody has an answer. Whether they say Ben Franklin or Jesus or Michael Jackson, they all have some answer. We've done this for 20 consecutive weeks, and so we're on question 20. And I thought this one was perfect for some of the stuff we were talking about tonight, it just serendipitously. The way we do this is we have everyone in chat answer, and I answer, and if you'll join us, you can answer. And the
Okay.
question for this week, question 20, is what does friendship mean to you? And so I'll have chat. Anyone in chat is welcome. I invite you. Express what friendship means to you, and I'll read some of them out. But Jason, since you talked about some of this, what does the boss versus friend relationship, what does friendship mean to you?
If that is a very tough question. Um, I think at the end of the day, friendship means to me complete trust. Um, Not that you can't trust your boss fully, but I think there is some reality in that your boss um, is entrusted to the company, and your boss's interests entrusted to the company at the end of the day, versus your friend's trust is held very intimately between the two of you, and does factor in your ultimate success. Um, that's definitely a tough one, but um, I think when I get down to trust at the most intimate level, that's where I see friendship.
So, some folks in chat are saying we might have done this question earlier. We did do something that got a lot around trust. I don't have the question list. It's definitely number 20. I don't know what we covered in the past. Some of you could look up the question list and figure out what in earlier weeks looked like this. But I agree with you. I guess I think of friendship in an action sense. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, friendship is that person who will answer your call in the middle of the night and not mind that you woke them up. Like that's the true
Mm-hmm.
friend, is the person, canonically who's there for you, and they're putting your interest up with their own. I'd like to say they put your interest ahead of their own. I don't know if anyone ever does that,
Mm.
like really does that. That's a deeper psychological question.
Altruism, yeah.
Yeah, whether or not altruism is real, um
Sure.
I like to believe it is. uh And my own experience with it is I can be altruistic, and then my humanity comes back after I'm altruistic and calculates how to make gain out of the good I did. That's my own personal experience. Is I can be
Mm.
altruistic, but then when my mind has a minute of downtime, it says, and here's how we're gonna really like make profit off the good you did. But for me, friendship is and I don't like that about myself. I just think everybody has that loop in the back of their mind that gets greedy. But oh yeah, okay. So for whatever reason, Arthur Aaron, when he wrote these questions, question 16 was, what do you value most in a friendship? This one is, what does friendship mean to you? So they are fairly similar, which is very interesting. I had never noticed that before. But let's see what some of the answers are here. My friend is the person sitting in jail with you over terrible decisions. All right, fair enough. Let me see what. Well, friends do come to you when you're in trouble, right? The friend is the person who comes to bail you out, not to yell at you for how dumb you were to do it. I think that's a big part of it, right? Friendship means that you're there to share the laughter, joys, tears, and grief. Pashi says, all right. Let's see. It's also the person you may not see for years, and when you reconnect, you restart conversations as if they never stopped. I completely agree with that. Trust, confidentiality, love, assistance, compassion. Oh, and I'm taking the words out of your mouth. Kona karma. So we have friends bail you out of jail. Best friends are sitting next to you. Oh, that's interesting. Oh boy, that's fantastic. Friendship is kindness. Yeah. So I don't have a perfect answer to this, but I think I used to feel that friendship was also a lot about loyalty. I heard it said in a bad way. It's off color a little bit. But friends don't ask you why you need to bury a body in the desert. They just get a shovel and come with you. And, that may not be the perfect definition of friendship, but it gets emotionally at the commitment that at least has always represented friendship to me. So thank you for joining our weekly ritual. Channels and communities are made of their rituals, and I'm glad to see you laughing. So we have a few questions that have been submitted. We use this tool. We can jump to those, or is there something else you'd like to talk about before? Because we usually run an hour and a half or so. We're getting towards that. Is there something else you want to ask me as a leader, or you want to talk about that we haven't gotten to?
Um, but just before we get into the questions, I think something to touch on is probably the self-care aspects of leadership.
Oh
We
yeah,
mentioned it kind of briefly in the phone call,
yeah,
but that's always kind of the big one. Um, for example, I mentioned before Bob Iger. Bob Iger's schedule, the guy's up at 4 a.m. He works out, meditates. He's in the office before everybody. He leaves the office after everyone. And he carries the schedule regardless of where he is in the world, whether he's traveled or not. It's 4 a.m. no matter what. Um, that is such an interesting one. And I think as we're in an age of Gary V's and Tim Robbins and all to we see as endless go-getters, where the line actually exists between you need to endlessly be fueled and moving, and you actually need to stop and regenerate and take care of yourself.
this is a really tough issue, self care. I talk sometimes. I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's a very short read. It's probably only 5 or 8 minutes to read. A Harvard Business Review article called "Manage Your Energy, Not Your Time," and
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot about the value of getting rest, getting good nutrition, and how that will make you more effective at work. I do wonder, for some of the workaholic or apparently workaholic, always on, up at 4 a.m. folks, is that really what they believe is best, or is it a form of credibility slash intimidation? In other
Mm,
words, because I work so hard, I can demand anything from you because you can never say, well, you don't do it. I don't know, but I feel like for some leaders, myself included, by the way, sometimes, you want to be strong at work. You want to show how much you've done because then you can set the standards for others. And because as a leader, one of the hardest things is when you need to ask of someone something you're not doing yourself.
mm,
That can
mm,
be, even if it's appropriate, right? Even if it's appropriate to say, well, uh, an example in my world is an on call rotation. I'm not on the little team that maintains a service. So I'm not carrying a pager for that service, but I need to ask someone else to carry a pager for the service. So I'm now asking
mm.
them to be on call and maybe get woken up at night if a server goes down, but I'm not going to get woken up at night. How do you do that without, because in America at least, even though there's all kinds of privilege, we have an image that it's wrong to be like, yeah, you're going to have to get up, but I'm going to be sleeping. That would be a jerk thing to say or do.
Sure.
I wonder if some of those leaders, it's not a defense mechanism to being able to be either intimidating or demanding. Making it more personal, though, I've definitely learned as I've gotten further in my career that I need to manage my own mental energy because not only am I less effective when I'm tired or stressed, I'm also less pleasant. And what we haven't talked about much is how a leader can really impact the mental health of their team negatively.
Mm,
We've talked about how
yeah.
they can support it. We haven't talked about how leadership failures, and by failure, I even only mean human breakdowns in their behavior, can be hard for the employees. Because if you're short with someone or you're judgmental or you don't listen or you interrupt, all of those things can be massively impactful. Something Jason I can share and people in the chat we've talked about before. Just the fact I hold a vice president title and I run a big group and I'm older and I'm big and I'm loud, all of those ands combine to where I can land very heavily on someone when I don't intend to. So,
Mm.
what I intend is an honest question. Have you thought about if that button would look better in purple? Can be heard as, what an idiot you are to have made that button in blue.
Mm,
And so the
mm,
person is hearing it or feeling it as, oh my God, he wanted purple. And now all he's going to, I had 5 minutes with the vice president, and what he's going to remember is I gave him a blue button when he wanted purple. I didn't say any of that, but that's what they're coming up with.
sure.
So I wandered around a little bit on that, but we can jump over to chat questions now. If you chat, you all know the drill. There's a whole bunch of you here. There's 90 people watching. Um, if and no question has more than 3 votes, so that's normal for our channel. Most people sit back and chill. But if you want to vote anything up, Jason and I will take a few questions before Dave and I, who are both 2 drinks in now, will go have dinner. So the first question we have is, and this is a good one for you, Jason, are there real world strategies that leaders can employ to mitigate the risk of mental health issues in employees?
Mm,
We may end up with the wrong one pinned because some people voted. So thank you all for voting. We'll stick with this one though. Cross training on activities to cover employees taking time off, etc. Are there strategies? Do you work on that at all? Like how to Well, anyway, I'll let you answer.
Yeah, sure. So for some companies within the game space, we've what's effectively like an HR service. Um, Mostly because we're pretty invested into people that work within the space, um, but also because people don't seem to understand how to address employee mental health too well. Um, I think kind of making it a normal thing to regularly have these workshops, maybe an annual workshop on managing stress, goes a long way towards not only giving people the tools directly, but saying as a workspace that this is something we're interested in, that your mental well-being is something that is important to us in general. So in effectively making it more likely people do actually employ the tools or even seek help. Um, Giving people time to meditate, or even utilizing positive way can be very powerful. I've seen very effective workspaces use meditation to enter flow states, but also to effectively exit them. I think that's not something that's often talked about when it comes to the flow state is how to effectively leave it. Um, Usually because we're desperately trying to stay in it. But if the day is over, and you don't get out of that state, you bring a lot of work home with you, or you continue to overwork yourself. And as effective as that can sometimes be, ultimately impacts your mental health. So sometimes I'll see that in a workspace where the leader, the manager will walk people through meditation, help them get into the place that they need to be, but also exit that on site before people leave. Um,
Wow. That's an
yeah.
amazing workplace. I was just thinking, I haven't seen any of that at my workplace. I have shared, we talk a lot about flow in this community. And I've talked about the fact I often go to work angry that I have to go because I don't want to
Mm.
go. But then I leave work upset that I have to leave because I've
Mm.
achieved flow state and I feel engaged and productive. And so I can actually, and obviously those emotions on the surface sound super contradictory. Like I'm angry I have to go to work and then I'm angry I have to leave. That just sounds inconsistent. But it's very true for me experientially. What you're suggesting is great. And I can't, you're inspiring me with the fact I need to go back to my teams and figure out how to have more of this discussion, not only about mental health, but even just about stress management and about the fact that we care about mental well being. Because it's not, I think a lot of workplaces, and this came up a little bit in the talk with Dr. Kanagia, they're afraid to admit that you might be under stress or that it might be good to reduce your stress because they're afraid that will result in you being lazy. Like they
Mm.
only understand two states. You're either stressed out and scared, and so you're busting your ass, or you're feeling comfortable and therefore not working very hard. And they don't believe there's some better state in the middle. That's my
Sure.
yeah.
That I see pretty often. I've worked with a couple of AAA developers and publishers, and one of them that brought us in had about three suicides while working on a game,
Wow.
and this is, I mean, not even the record. The record is actually probably 3x that, which is depressing to hold. But the reality of breaking down what was going on in space was just an utter breakdown of communication. Not even just on a personal level, but people thinking their manager as inhuman, seeing their managers really overwork themselves, trying to emulate that behavior, not seeing the full scope of the manager's existence. So one of the things that we have done with publishers that we've worked with is highlighted leaders and had them be carriers of that message. Very importantly, and this is how I deal with stress,
Mm.
and this is how I know people should deal with stress, and this is how I don't always deal with stress. Um, that says a lot immediately, because the person of power loses no power in having that conversation. They only stand to gain even more power conversation, because they're exerting a level of over the issue that they struggle with.
Right.
Um, it's very, very important. And we've done research on this of who has the conversation, how it becomes more effective. Um, the direct manager has to have that conversation.
Oh,
That you'll
interesting.
see
Okay.
exponential growth.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you. That's a tip I can use. That's good to know.
yeah, of course.
All right, awesome. Next question is, and you may not know, I certainly don't. Do millennials have more mental health issues per capita, or are
Mm,
they just more diagnosed?
sure. I do know that. So yes and yes. Um, So there's a couple of things that factor into this. Increasingly, it is certainly easier to diagnose and identify these issues, but also younger and younger generations are facing peculiar points of stress and emotional development that are working together in a very unique way. Um, I mean, think about it. Your access to information at a significantly younger age makes you much more prone to deal with issues that might not have affected other generations at that same age. Um, so we're seeing more and more people are developing these issues, dealing with trauma. They're easier to diagnose, but also with population growth, we're seeing that solid scaling. Um, and the reasons as to why are relatively shaky. We're still trying to really wrap our head around. There's definitely a lot of theories as to why mental health issues are exponentially growing. Um, we don't know if it is because of a particular generation so much as this is something just to be expected at this point. That these issues, the rate of diagnosis, is somewhere between 3 and 10% per year at this point. So it's growing. It's growing dramatically. It's not a millennial issue. It's not a Gen Z issue. We're going to see it in the next generation as well, that they're going to rapidly deal with these issues. I've heard the wildest possible theories. I even had a professor suppose that it's essentially the cancer of our environment, essentially removing us, culling us, to that it's simply a matter of technology, which I don't necessarily agree with. Um, to it's essentially is something that's kind of changed. It's an evolutionary malfunction. Some people even hypothesize. Regardless of what it is, it isn't. And the very real fear that mental health issues can destroy us is it's a reality. Um, I see some people saying social media, individualistic cultural issues. These are really powerful thoughts and theories, but we see these issues growing in the East as well, where individualistic thinking and culture is not as prominent. Um, and again, we're almost at a loss as to one, how to stop it, and two, why it is as bad as it is.
Yeah, I suspect it's one of those situations that has a lot of additive factors. But for me, speaking as someone who's a little older, and people know it came up just last Friday.
Mm,
My parents are much older, and they've now both passed away. But in their generation, no one talked about mental illness. And in fact, if you had a mentally ill relative, you cared for that person at home and hid them from the world. Like, there was very much a sense of like a mentally ill relative is a family shame that you conceal,
mm-hmm,
or that you and so there certainly is some, even though our knowledge of how to talk about mental illness and mental challenges and stress is poor, our it's advanced remarkably from when the approach was just hide that.
Sure.
Uh,
Sure. I think what you're discussing is what some clinicians will call, and this is a very not out there, but it's not necessarily a highly evidence-backed thought just yet, but is gaining a lot of favor. Is called transgenerational trauma. Um, the idea that previous generations deal with these issues, don't properly address them or recover from them, and they pass on to the
mm,
next generation until someone does. And I've seen this used in everything from infidelity, being an issue that passes down until somebody deals with it and then rectifies the problems that come from infidelity in a marriage, to basic other things like anxiety that's just never addressed. And so, the child inherits behaviorally and even genetically that anxiety, doesn't get that addressed either, continues to pass it down, and all of these children will deal with it, even worse as these generations go, until somebody finally does. And that transgenerational work is very, very challenging. Somebody kind of brought it up in the chat as well. Um, their parents' issues passed down to them. It's a realistic thing. It goes back to what we talked about earlier. They might not deserve the issues that you struggle with, but it unfortunately is your responsibility. And that's a tough one, a very tough one to realize.
yeah. You all of us want our worlds to cosmically be fair. And somehow
Mm,
the idea that things that happened in your childhood that you couldn't control but you still have to deal with violate that sense of fairness is my layman's explanation. And I think we all rebel against having to put in effort on something, clean up somebody else's mess, whether it's our parents' mess or our family's mess or society's mess. I know I rebel against it, and unfortunately, that it's a complete cliche that life is not fair. And one of Duke of Thought, one of our folks in chat, has said life isn't fair. But we all there is some inherent stress when things feel unfair.
yeah.
So, all right, yeah, a bunch of people are getting exhausted because we're on such a heavy topic, I think, and it's great. I appreciate everybody sticking here. We'll do one or two more questions. Call it good. The next question is: can Jason or Ethan speak to managing mental health issues that impact entire teams? And then
Mm,
the author said, such as an employee's sociopathy or NPD, which I'm not versed enough to know what NPD is. Maybe you do, Jason. But basically, obviously, different types of mental health can impact or be visible to a whole team. Do you have thoughts on that? And then I can share what I would do as a manager.
sure. I've experienced that a couple of times, and it's a real challenge. One of the things that we really are proud of is having so many staff members who do struggle, or have struggled with these issues, and so they can speak really from a place of experience, and it shows when you have the conversation with them that they never have to say, "Oh, I totally get how you feel." You know that they get how you feel because the way they talk with you shows that experience. But we did have an employee that was suicidal, um, because of a mix of their mental health and a life filled with trauma. Some of the more severe mental health issues were affecting them that um, don't necessarily have a control. They come up when they come up, and you see the toll it takes. Everybody is worried. Everybody is anxious. Everybody is depressed. What do you do? If you isolate the employee, you risk their mental health even further. You also look fairly callous in the process. If you task everybody with being dedicated to helping this person, inevitably they will burn out. They will become worn out. They might even lose sympathy for this person. How do you balance it? And we learned it in real time that it was just the ultimate challenge. Um, and whether we balanced it correctly or not is a tough one. What I learned from that experience is certainly when somebody within a team is struggling, instinctively the other team member want to do something. They seem to be drawn towards a problem, especially if you've created the right team, a bunch of problem solvers, solution focused people. Um, and again, if they can't solve that problem, they get frustrated very fast. So giving them tangible solutions to how they can be helpful is important. Um, yeah, I think that's almost the first thing that you have to think of is what happens to the rest of the team. How does the rest of the team feel in response to this person struggling? I like to set expectations of, hey, just taking a moment to ask if they're doing okay is good. It is a solution. It does bring support, and that is a good solution that you can provide. Laying the boundary of and the expectation of you can't fix this. You don't need to fix this. By doing your job and checking on the person, you are working on this. Um, Also leaning into the person that's struggling and making sure that they have all of the effective support that they need. Are they seeing a professional? Are they utilizing their mental health days that we allot them? Are they utilizing personal days? Are they being mindful in working towards these issues? Or are they really overwhelmed with these issues and not able to address them? Um, and at the end of the day, even seeing the necessity to give that person leave, essentially, if they're getting to a point where they're increasingly unstable, not able to address the issue, and seeing that work in any capacity is not something that should be on their radar. Their own health should be, I think, is ultimately where I end up going as that problem progresses. Um, but
And that
is that
goes
the
to the
right
next
answer?
question. The next question asks, if there is a team problem, can someone get short-term or long-term disability, at least in the US, over a mental diagnosis? My layman's understanding is yes. You seem to be nodding.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately the number one cause of disability in the United States is stress related. Um, it costs the corporate world at least,
Oh, it's got to
I
be
think this
billions,
is
if
North
not
America.
trillions.
It's hundreds of billion. Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
about 312 billion. Um, it's a significant drain.
Yeah.
So if you're an employer, here's one reason: if you just care about the numbers, to take care of your staff, because that money is real. But yes, and it happens. Um, it's not livable, not realistically. I've actually been there myself, um, and it is something where if you are contemplating going that direction, um, I definitely recommend getting a lawyer and being ready to be challenged in every degree because it's very hard to prove. And if your company is a smaller company, they'll probably battle you on.
Yeah. Larger companies have experienced it so much, they may have different practices, but again, counseling people just from a career perspective, anytime you take a relatively uncommon problem to your smaller employer, realize it's the first time they've dealt with it.
Yeah,
And to what Jason has said earlier, it may not be like that may not be fair that you have to deal with the fact that your employer has no idea how to handle your need. But for a small employer, that's very often true. And they don't have the expertise. There's just a and it doesn't mean they're evil. They might be. It doesn't mean they're unconcerned, although again they might be. But they just don't know. And so
sure.
you will get all sorts of uneducated responses, um, Yeah. And that's unfortunate, but anytime you bring a concern, relocation, divorce, illness, parents, the law in Washington, which again, I'm not qualified to speak on, but the law in Washington, I can at least say, has recently changed about, say, family and medical leave. Your employer and your boss may not have gotten the memo. Like, they don't know that now the rules are different. So, Jason, we've gone a couple hours. We've answered a bunch of questions. I think maybe we'll wrap up. Is there anything else you want to say to the audience or to me to help your cause? Because I think what you're doing, there's so many incredible causes, but what you're doing is amazing that you've helped 30,000 people. Like,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, some of the best ways that people can support us, again, are being sure to follow us across social media, making sure that they're being part of those signaling. It just goes a significantly long way and helps us as we start to get into content generation and conversation pieces. I really plan on starting to share more about the stories of the people that go through our program successfully and find a way to kind of highlight the great courage that they have for going through that process, because I think that's really critical. But I always kind of like to leave on a quote, especially quotes that get people to think and think really thoroughly. One of the ones that impacted me a lot when I was starting to learn about leadership was this quote. I think it was improperly ascribed to General Patton, but it says, "In the long run, it is what we do not say that will destroy us." I think that goes a long way towards our mental health, as employees, our mental health in general. Is something to contemplate as you move forward in life.
Well, you wouldn't have any way to know it, but war history and the history of generals is one of my favorite topics and comes up here in stream. So Patton is on my long list of figures I admire. Oh, and somehow Jason just blanked himself out of his background. Like, you killed your webcam somehow.
No, I think the battery died.
The battery died. Okay.
On the DSLR, yeah.
That's cool. So I'll wrap up though, and just say a couple things from my end. Number one, I appreciate everyone who stuck here through a little bit of our AV challenges. A good Sunday night stream. Second, I'm live with Jason's mutual friend who introduced us, Devin Nash, tomorrow at 4 o'clock. We're going to talk about how to pitch your ideas. So last week we did what is a good idea. This week we're going to do how to pitch. And then Friday I'll be back with Dr. Kanagia. If you haven't joined our Discord and have things you want me to try and talk about with Dr. K, we'll do that. Tomorrow is really your coaching on how to be better in your career. And then I will get back to standard career building after the next session with Dr. K. It's strange coincidence that both Jason and Dr. K lined up in these weeks. But I think talking about your mental health and stress is very important. And the last thing I would say, my sort of end thing, is not a quote. It goes back to the rant. I would just say, don't be the jerk who belittles the person who's struggling. It's so much fun to say things like, "Suck it up, buttercup." And, there's like all these lines. Try and have a little empathy, because one day you'll be in that tough spot and you'll want someone to have a little bit of empathy for you. It doesn't mean we don't hold people to high standards or we don't want them to perform, but realize everybody has crappy days. And, try and form those relationships where you help somebody through their crappy day and they help you through. So with that, I've really enjoyed this talk. And I will, Jason, I'll bid you good night. I hope you get well from your flu. Thank you for sticking with us for 2 hours. And everyone else, I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock Pacific. Good night. Cheers.
Good night. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Hi, I'm Ethan Evans. I hope you've gotten a lot out of this show. To follow us on YouTube, please click the bell icon in the bottom left and subscribe. Also, you can find us live on Twitch, where we answer questions interactively. Further, we have a Discord community, where not only I, but other members of the community team up to answer your questions interactively. Hope you've enjoyed. Thank you.